morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the Divergent series keeps on chugging along, despite virtually no encouragement from fandom. And I say that, well, there's actually a lot of evidence about that, which we'll discuss in just a moment, but the latest is that yesterday there was a pretty big casting announcement about the franchise, and nobody cared. So what was it? Well, yesterday, The Hollywood Reporter, they were very proud of themselves. They put exclusive in the title, and the reason they do that is because of the nature of entertainment reporting these days. When a story breaks on any of the websites, everyone else quickly picks it up. So when they put exclusive in the title, it's to make sure that people realize it originated on that site. So they go, exclusive! Jeff Daniels joins the Divergent series in a key role. And then they talked about in the article that he'll be playing the role of David, which is indeed a very important role in the final two films in the series, Allegiant. They're breaking the last book up into 2 movies. Now, I understand that Jeff Daniels perhaps isn't the sexiest of casting announcements just for that reason, because of the actor. But still, this is such a key role in the franchise, and I think a lot of people were wondering who would land the role, and it is a pretty prestigious actor. It is surprising that nobody picked up that story. Now, I think this is for a couple of reasons. One, I think that people were disappointed in the Insurgent film, the fan base, and I don't know how many of them will return for the 3rd film, which is a bad sign for Lionsgate Summit, which of course is the studio also behind The Hunger Games, and that's because Insurgent wasn't able to increase the box office numbers of the first film. So they really didn't win over any new fans with the second entry, which you really should. The whole idea is that the first film, when it goes to the ancillary markets like streaming, hotel rooms, airplanes, people discover it and they go, oh, this is pretty good, I should watch the next one in the theater. But that didn't happen. So they didn't bring on any new fans, and now it looks like they might lose some fans because people weren't so happy with Insurgent. Now there's another problem, and that's The Maze Runner. I think The Maze Runner has been a major problem for the Divergent series, because it begs the question of how many of these young adult dystopian future films the fandom can support. Now, of course, they support The Hunger Games. That's the huge juggernaut in this market. And then there's kind of room just for maybe one more smaller franchise. And at first, that was Divergent. But The Maze Runner has really come on the scene and captured people's attention. Perhaps because it has a male lead, and so it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air for fans. And then also, I think The Fault in Our Stars took a lot of the Divergent series thunder, because it also stars Shailene Woodley. For instance, if you look at the MTV Movie Awards, what were the big winners besides Neighbors? Well, it was The Fault in Our Stars and The Maze Runner, and so Divergent got edged out there. And then I also think that The Maze Runner is such an inexpensive franchise, and they kind of stuck it to Divergent, by the way, as they recently announced that the third book in the Maze Runner series will not be split into 2 films for Fox's franchise. So it's a little like, hey, we're too cool for that, we don't need to do that. But the films are so inexpensive to make, they're like less than half the budget of the Divergent films, that they're just a better return. So I also think it makes the Divergent series a little less sexy to Hollywood in that way as well. So going forward with these Allegiant films, I would say, besides casting, the #1 thing that they should be doing is trying to bring down that budget, because the franchise has shown that it just can't support the over $100 million they're spending on each entry. Now, perhaps the other problem is that while they've done an impressive job of getting named talent to sign on for the Divergent series, I think that they do such a poor job utilizing that talent that maybe that's another reason people aren't too excited about Jeff Daniels joining the cast. But then again, Patricia Clarkson didn't have too much to do in The Maze Runner either, although you could argue it's because she entered only at the last moment. But with Divergent, Kate Winslet, I thought she was better in Insurgent, but not really particularly utilized. That Naomi Watts, totally wasted. And then, you've had other actors in there, and I guess they can name actors into these young adult dystopian future, franchises, because they do pretty well at the box office. But Hunger Games still remains the best destination for not only fans, but name actors. However, I think that's because the Hunger Games does a better job utilizing them. Elizabeth Banks, Donald Sutherland, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Julianne Moore, Jeffrey Wright even, Woody Harrelson. These are all really well-defined characters in that franchise. And maybe that's because they have less younger characters to focus on, right? They really only got Katniss and Peeta and Gale to some extent, although not really. He's really quite the third wheel on that film. But then over in the Divergent series, they have a number of actors. They've got Shailene Woodley, they've got, of course, Theo James, they've got Miles Teller, they have Zoe Kravitz to some degree, and I think that all of those characters get so much attention that they waste the actors they're able to sign on there. I mean, they had Octavia Spencer in the film, and it was really just a glorified cameo. So maybe that's another reason that people aren't too excited about Jeff Daniels. But for those who are fans of the series, they'll know that that is a key role that should have a lot to do. So I'm curious, if you're a fan of the Divergent books and to some degree maybe the movies, if you're not, please let us know in the comments. But what do you think of the Jeff Daniels casting? Why do you think this didn't quite catch on? Is it just because he's not an exciting actor? Or is it truly because the Divergent series is losing ground in the young dystopian future marketplace? All right, so we have another casting announcement for the second story of the day, and this is very interesting, and that's that Justin Bieber apparently is going to be in Zoolander 2. And so I think the first question about this, is it going to be just a cameo where he does like a walk-on, gets a laugh, and then leaves? Or will he have something of an actual role in the film? I'd actually be rooting for an actual role in the film. And I think this is a really big gamble on Ben Stiller's part. This could either be genius, which elevates the film and brings in a lot of fans, and we'll get to that in just a moment, the evidence for that, or it could make the film, jump the shark, and people could be like, I don't like Justin Bieber. I mean, for instance, when the Joker reveal came out on Friday from Jared Leto and David Ayer, a lot of people were like, he's like some weird cross between Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus. And they meant that in a negative way. So maybe people don't want to see Justin Bieber. But I would actually argue that is apparently not the case. Because if you look at the recent ratings for the Comedy Central roast that he did, they did very well. They were the third most watched roast on Comedy Central. The first two were Charlie Sheen and Jeff Foxworthy. But Bieber pulled in 4.4 million viewers, and that's more than 1 million than James Franco's roast. And he's an actor very much in demand. So there is an audience for Justin Bieber. He does still, bring in eyeballs. So I think that's, if I was a producer on Zoolander and Ben Stiller came to me with this idea, I'd be like, let's think it out. It would depend on what the role was for Bieber, but I would be open to it. And they have a lot of other good cast members. They've got Fred Armisen, who I think will be great, Billy Zane, Penelope Cruz, and then also, of course, Will Ferrell is returning, and you have Owen Wilson. So I think you have enough there to dilute any ridiculous that Bieber might bring, and if Bieber actually does do a good job, that could be amazing, and people might be interested in seeing that. Now, as for Bieber himself, he really has become a joke these days, but I think quite cleverly, he's decided to embrace the joke and be in on it rather than being just the butt of the joke. So I think that this is a logical next step in that process. First signing on for the roast, now doing a Zoolander movie. And he does totally fit in Zoolander's world, right? I think that Ben Stiller is being very clever and thinking outside of the box with this sequel. I love the way he introduced it at Paris Fashion Week, and now I think bringing in Justin Bieber, I think that these are new moves that make it seem a little more fresh, which is good because I think audiences overall feel Stiller has been a little stale lately. And you can see that's evidenced best by Night at the Museum 3, which was a solid performer. I liked the movie, but I think people felt it was the same old, same old. I mean, again, it was a solid performer, but not with the kind of business that Ben Stiller used to do. So that's the second story of the day, and the third story of the day I'm very happy to report, and that's that Blackish creator Kenya Barris has gotten a movie. Now, I love Blackish. It's a freshman sitcom on ABC, and I think it's one of the best shows that the network has. And in fact, it's on tonight. So if you've never watched Blackish, I urge you to give it a try. In fact, it's part of ABC's really strong slate of shows on Wednesday night. Except for the middle. I don't watch the middle. However, I would have to say that even though Modern Family is the most famous member of that lineup and really anchors the night and is one of ABC's most prestigious shows, I feel it's often the weakest of the three, and that the Goldbergs and Blackish are often far better. But then Blackish has actually gotten a lot of its thunder stolen this season by Empire on Fox, which runs opposite the show. And a lot of people have talked about how it's kind of like counterproductive to divide the black audience that way. Because, apparently a lot of black viewers watch their TV when it's on instead of DVR. And so they've all gone to Empire. And Blackish has kind of, been not paid enough attention to, especially considering the quality of the show. It's really well written, wonderful family, and really gifted comedians. Everyone in the family that they portray there is gifted, from the parents. And by the way, the wife is played by Diana Ross's daughter, who, again, an amazing comedian, but the kids are also really funny. So I love that show, and I felt bad that, while I'm very happy for Empire's success, and that's a real game changer, actually. That's Lee Daniels' show, actually, from The Paperboy and Precious and The Butler. But I really feel that it's sad in some ways that the Blackish has, been ignored because of the success of Empire. So to see Kenya Barris get a movie deal is very exciting indeed. So what's he doing? Well, Scott Rudin, of course, the other Harvey Weinstein of Hollywood, as I like to say, the alternate reality version of Harvey Weinstein, is producing a Good Times movie, and he's hired Kenya Barris to come on board and write it. And I think that's a great choice, although, as people are pointing out, it's a very different setup. Now, of course, Blackish is about an affluent black family, and Good Times is about a family trying to make ends meet. But both are comedies, and again, I think that Kenya Barris has shown a really good job at depicting a family life in a comedic, yet often, in a way that has a message. So I think he's a great choice for this, and I'm just very happy to see his name making headlines at all, because again, I think he's been overshadowed by the success of Empire. Now, something else that's a bit controversial about the Good Times movies is that they're changing the era of the show. Of course, it's a classic television show, although I do wonder how much of that's going to translate to box office for a movie. Sometimes these things don't quite work out. But what they're going to do is they're going to make it go from the 70s to the 60s. Now, some people are saying, well, is it because there are more, important moments in black history to discuss then? But there are plenty in the 1970s as well. But my feeling is it's not so much has to do with history, but the fact that Netflix is doing a show about with a largely black cast in the 1970s in New York, which of course is a musical from Baz Luhrmann. So I think they feel that that's going to cover that area, and that Good Times wants to differentiate itself in that. However, I would have argued that it would be better to make it in modern times, current day. I think there's a lot to say. Obviously, those tragic riots in Baltimore yesterday evening, not last night, but the night before, and that situation is still, simmering. It's a difficult scenario, and maybe it's too soon. Maybe because Good Times is supposed to be largely a comedic property, people might not find that situation funny. But you can do some really biting commentary with humor, and I feel that that would make, Good Times seem a little more relevant than another, time warp property. You've had, of course, Mad Men, you've had X-Men First Class, now you have X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse. All of those are, let's have a blockbuster in a different era. And I think, it's better to maybe discuss the things that are going on right now. So I think that would have been more exciting, but I can understand studios, which are very risk-averse, not wanting to do that. So I'm curious, are you a fan of Blackish? What do you think of Kenya Barris getting the Good Times movie? Do you think a Good Times movie is a good idea? And what do you think of moving it from the 70s to the 60s? Do you like that? Would you have kept it in the 70s and just taken on the Get Down at Netflix? Or would you have gone with my idea and make it set in current day? All right, so those are the three stories of the day. On to the viewer question from Gabriel Gomez. And Gabriel says, Grace, quick question. You/we talk a lot about different genres oversaturating the market, but I was wondering if you think that Hollywood has begun churning out too many movies in general. There certainly has been a huge increase in the number of movies being released, say from the 60s or 70s, and it feels like there has been a surge in the last decade or so. Do you think that Hollywood is cannibalizing itself by releasing too many movies, especially now in the digital age? Great question, Gabriel, which is why I picked it. Thank you so much. But I think there are a couple of different things going on there. Oh, then he had some nice things to say about BTT. Big fan, watch every day. And then he gave me an infinite number of smiley faces. So I think this is a very interesting situation. And for those of you not aware, in the 60s and 70s, basically for most of the time they've been making movies, like one movie came out a weekend, if that, right? Like the movies had a very long time to make their money at the box office because there was virtually no competition. But of course, things have changed. And I think that's for a number of reasons. First of all, Star Wars and Jaws really changed the game in terms of these big event movies, blockbusters. So those movies are very front-loaded. So there's room. That creates a situation where there's room for other films to come in there and make their money right away because they don't play for as long. Although, interestingly, both those films did play for very long. But, I think, to be fair, major blockbusters today also play for a very long time. But, you know, you basically, look at Furious 7. It made all of its money, over $1 billion. It's the 5th highest grossing film of all time in just a month. So, you know, it doesn't need the 2 or 3 or 4 months that movies used to enjoy back in the day. So that's one reason. Movies make their money faster. So, of course, if they're making their money so quickly, studios want to get in there and get more of the money that's on the table. Then there are far more studios. Everybody wants to get on this, and you used to just have like the studio system and you had your main couple of studios. But now you have smaller distributors, you have indie distributors, you know, there's just so many different studios in there, and so they all want a piece of the pie. So that's another reason you're seeing more content. Then next, they want to remain competitive with television. Television comes out with such frequency. There's also now digital entertainment, as Gabriel mentioned, from the internet, from Netflix, that I think that movies want to make sure they stay relevant, and that there's a new episode they have to compete with every week. They want to have new content, right? Also, Hollywood, sometimes their movies don't work out, so they're minimizing the risk by churning out more, right? You don't like this one? How about this one? Then next they become television themselves. You know, back in the day, a movie would then go to VHS, you know, until, you know, and then before VHS was invented, it would just be occasionally re-released in the theater, right, or played on television. Then for a while, just VHS and television repeats was the only way to go. You played on airplanes as well, but very limited exposure. Then there was DVD, which was a huge cash cow for the industry, and that unfortunately went away. But now with digital streaming, this content can live on for quite a long time in that regard. So they want to also get a lot of content that way, because I think a lot of people at this point discover films only digitally. They don't go to the theater, they wait till it comes out, especially as that window shrinks between the theatrical release and when it's available digitally. So they want to get that in there as well. And you're even seeing movies released day and date in theaters and digitally. So that's contributing to that as well. Then next, I think Gabriel is right, there has been an explosion in the last few years because of franchise filmmaking. And that's this mentality which is, you know, the fans have it and it's encouraged by the studios that you need to see every film in a franchise, right? You need to see every chapter of the MCU. You can't just watch the Avengers films or just the Thor films, right? Or just who would just watch the Thor films? Or, you know, just at this point, the Captain America movies, which have gotten quite good. I think they want to have a situation where you got to watch each one, and then they release like 3 a year, and that's just Marvel. So DC wants to get in on that action. Fox, with their Marvel properties, wants to get in on that action, and you just see it multiply very quickly. And also animation has contributed quite a lot to this overcrowding, right? DreamWorks wanted to release 3 movies a year. That didn't work out. And you might see some of these comic book studios have the same results and decide, I think 3 is too many, maybe we should just release 2 a year. And I would encourage that. I would encourage 2 movies a year and maybe some proliferation of what they're doing on the small screen like with Netflix. But 3 is very hard to support. Look what's happening to poor Ant-Man, right? Ant-Man is nowhere to be seen. So I think that's what's contributing to the situation. And I think that another thing is that while some studios might be like, as Gabriel says, we're cannibalizing ourselves, there's nothing they can do. That's the way the game has evolved, and you know, you just have to play it, right? You can't decide to sit out, because then your studio suffers. You know, you just have to get in there and try and get, you know, it's like a frenzy. It's a feeding frenzy. And I think you can see that reflected in the box office receipts, the coverage, and the way even the fans talk about these movies. I think that movies, and I think this is very interesting, have become as competitive and you know, there's as much infighting as with politics and sports. And so it's interesting to see movies evolve that way. And there are a lot of games, so there are a lot of movies. All right, so thank you so much for your question, Gabriel. I hope my answer gave you some insight into what you were wondering. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.